Aloha!
And tonight, we were lucky to have a guest speaker all the way from Pupukea. And he loves to serve food. And he's going to give us special treat on orchid tonight. Okay? And let's welcome Doc DeMoss.
Thank you, sir. Good evening. Good evening. Okay, good evening. My name is Doug DeMoss. I've been growing orchids for over 50 years. And I kind of started, I was always a plant guy, but I got interested in Paphiopedilums. I saw one at Star Garden, and it wasn't this plant, but it was similar to this plant. This is Paphiopedilum lianum.
The first place you knew.
And this got me on my journey, eventually become a commercial orchid grower, and long story. But anyways, at the time I got interested in Paphiopedilums, it was the mid-70s. And there weren't a whole lot of Paphiopedilums growing in Hawaii. And the reason for that was Paphiopedilums were one of the first orchids to be hybridized, because they could take the seed, this is in the 1890s, they could take the seed and sow it at the base of the mother plant, and they would get germination. This was before Yamada's formula, all the stuff, all the formulas to grow, sow orchids in sterile media. So because they are a terrestrial orchid in that they grow in the understory, they could pull this off. So 50 or 60 years of hybridization, they went for big, glossy, different colors, reds, greens, yellows, but they had one common factor. They needed a cool break in order to flower, and we didn't get that here. So no one wanted to grow Paphiopedilums, with the exception of this lianum, which would flower regularly, so there wasn't a whole lot of interest. But when I got interested, it was kind of the period of rediscovering the orchids, the Paphiopedilum species. And I was intrigued. You get the AOS bulletin, and there was a guy named Ray Rands who would import collected Paphiopedilums. And we actually would pay to get that magazine airmailed down here so we could order for this guy before he'd sell it. So most of my interest in Paphiopedilums were in species. And that's pretty much what we're looking at today. This is a species from Borneo, Paphiopedilum loei. This is a Paphiopedilum hybrid between loei and philippinense, another multifloral. This is Vernese. This is related to the plant that got second place, although it should have gotten first place because it was such a hard thing to flower. This is the Chinese Paphiopedilum. This was originally jumbo collected in the late 80s, last 80s. This is Malapoense. Okay, we're going to do just a basic culture thing. We're not going to get too into different types and plant culture on different ideas. We're going to just give a kind of a basic idea of when to transplant, that kind of a basic thing. We can get a more detailed, maybe another talk about the different cultures for the different subspecies of Paphiopedilum. So tonight we're just going to talk about three different types. One is a multiflora. These two are multifloras. They open up one at a time, but the whole inflorescence will be open for a period of time all at once. And then the oldest flower will fall off. That's these two. This one is a successive flowering. So it will flower 3 to 4, maybe 5 flowers. In fact, it could even go longer. But it hardly ever has more than 2 flowers open at the same time. By the time the new flower opens, the old flower falls off. So this is a successive flower. And then there's this type, the single flower. They come in 2 leaf types, green like this, and a mottled leaf like this. These are actually really nice when they're not even in flower because of the modeling. Okay, those are the basic types. If you guys have any questions, I don't think I'm on a time limit like I was on Guinea. You can interrupt me if you want if it's something that's not clear. Okay, so we're going to basic culture, light. Paphiopedilums are the lowest light requiring orchid that you're going to grow. They're the ancestors of hybrids, and especially the species, are understory plants. Means that they don't grow in full sun. They're in pretty shaded conditions. They will attach themselves to cliff faces where a little bit of mulch will accumulate, and they will germinate in those crevices. So you want to give your Paphiopedilums pretty much Phalaenopsis light, maybe a little brighter for multifloras, but for single flowered green and models, you want to give about 50% shade. If you're growing mottled leaf Paphiopedilums, if the mottling starts to become indistinct and the leaves start to get a little yellow, you're giving it too much light. You got to give it more shade. And the more shade you give it, the more this mottling effect where the light dark will become more pronounced. Watering. Now, this is probably the toughest thing to learn about growing Paphiopedilums. We've all learned about epiphyte orchids, how they want to go wet to dry, because their roots have specialized cells that will take up water, and if you don't dry them out, they'll keep taking on water until they rot. Paphiopedilums are a little different. They don't really want to get bone dry. They want to have moisture constantly at their roots, but they don't want to be saturated. So if you envision how they grow in nature, they're growing in leaf litter that is very porous. And even though it retains a lot of moisture, it still also has a lot of air. And this is one thing that you have to realize when you're growing any kind of orchid. You have to feed your plant air as well as water. Too much water will rot your roots. And Paphiopedilums are a little more unforgiving. If you kill all the roots on a Paphiopedilum, it's going to be years for you to nurse it back to where it's going to flower again. Unlike a Cattleya or a Dendrobium or even a Phalaenopsis, if you lose its roots, well, it'll usually set it out on the bench, let it dry out. It'll put out a new set of roots right away. Paphiopedilums will not do that. They're very unforgiving. So a good idea about learning how to water your Paphiopedilum is to water it thoroughly in the pot. Let the water drain out. Have a pot the similar size with dry media and feel the difference in weight. Weight is and this is the hardest thing because you can't really quantify that, right? It's well, what's heavy and what's not. Well, this is something that you're going to have to learn. You'll notice that I have some holes drilled in soldering iron in these pots. That allows a little more air circulation to get in there. It also gives me a little window about what's going on inside my pot, even though it's deep. Another way you can tell is to stick your finger in the media. If you can put your finger down about this far and it's still wet, don't water for a while. Let your finger come dry in the first this much. This is especially useful when you finally get a plant into a bigger pot because it's always kind of heavy. Okay, water. Pests and diseases. Paphiopedilums have probably the least pest of any orchid that I've grown. But they have two major bad boys. One is a mealybug. Now, the mealybugs will live in your media and you'll never see them, never see them. Plant doesn't look really right, but you can't see anything until a flower spike comes up. When the flower spike comes up, the mealybugs come up with it. And then you know, guaranteed, you got mealybugs. But you can also tell with a little bit, I think there was one. Anyways, it's not here. But you can see right where the emerging leaves are coming out. If you see a little white kind of stuff in there, that's usually the presence of mealybugs. Mealybugs can be controlled by a drench of pyrethrin. Normally, my insecticides of choice when I give Orchid Society talks are rubbing alcohol and simple green. I don't use any simple green on Paphiopedilums. I use alcohol. If I can see a mealybug on the plant, I will do a little bit and you'll see them melt. Or if it's right in the center of the leaf, you can do a little squirt like that and kill them. Always do this in shade, never in direct sun. The pyrethrin pyronal is a 6% pyrethrin solution. You can drench your plants with it. You can spray your flowers with it. There's no resistance to it. The only downside is that it has almost no residual effect. It breaks down quickly in ultraviolet light. So you have to keep repeating. But it does work. When you finally get into the point where you have a lot of valuable plants, you're going to have to start thinking about using systemic insecticides. There's two that work well. There's actually three that work really well on Paphiopedilums. One is Merit 75, which is imidacloprid. The other one is Safari, which is another derivative of neonicotinoid, but it has a little different mode of action than Merit, so you can rotate them. And the third one is dimethoate. Dimethoate goes back to the old organophosphate insecticides like orthene. Everybody remembers orthene. That was sells at Walmart or wherever. Orthene also works well too, but these are all systemics. So they will temporarily turn the sap of your plant to poison. And that is really the only way to get rid of mealybugs. Unfortunately, you can control them with everything that I've told you before. But the only thing that's really going to kill them is a systemic. The other pest is spider mites, specifically the red spider mite. They get in the underside of the leaves so that you hardly know what's going on until you have an infestation. If you see kind of a silvery color under your leaves, with maybe a few little red spots, take a white t-shirt and rub the underside of the leaf and look at it. If it's orange, you have red spider mites. Now you can control a small infestation of mites with horticultural spray oil. Horticultural spray oils have different degrees of concentration. Tablespoon in a gallon, which is one of the lower dosages, is what I use on Paphiopedilums. You have to thoroughly coat the infected area because what you're going to do is you're going to smother them. Because insecticide will not kill mites, and a miticide will not kill insects, because mites are really not insects, they're kind of related to spiders. So an insecticide won't kill them. So again, there is a systemic miticide, Avid, that you can spray on Paphiopedilums too that will give complete control. But you have to use the surfactant though. You need complete coverage of the leaf. Okay, any questions on pests?
Can you spray alcohol throughout the whole plant, or is it just specific
No,
spots?
I don't like to do that because it's alcohol is killing by evaporation, right? So actually, the old school was to saturate a Q-tip and then touch the mealybug. But You can get away with just as long as you don't, go crazy. Just hit the spot. And it's usually right in the emerging leaf axil that you'll see it. Just a little. This is a great insecticide. Okay. Oh, watering, lights, insects. What do you got? Just potting media, yes. Yes.
How often it bloom? Once a year or 6 months?
It depends. Once you get them into a clump, they'll bloom usually reliably every year. The downside on Paphiopedilums is they take a long time for that first growth to the first flowering. And it takes a lot out of the plant to do that. So the second flowering after the first flowering will not be as good. If you don't kill the roots and you keep moving your plant up and you get it into pretty much a pot like this, which is almost a 6-inch pot, they should bloom for you every year. Especially if you live in Mililani, Wadiwa, Bubakea, where we get cooler nuts. Most Paphiopedilums will bloom better with a cool spot in middle of winter. This gentleman from Pennsylvania probably knows a lot about more about Paphiopedilums. That's a hotbed of Paphiopedilum growing. The East Coast is a hotbed of Paphiopedilum growing. There are some incredible plants. I used to do the New York show once a year, and incredible Paphiopedilums. Well, incredible lots of stuff, but the Paphiopedilums really exceed anything that we can grow here because they get that winter cold snap, and it just incredible inflorescences. Anyways, this goes back to temperature and a little too much information. Okay. It did not cover. Huh? The media I'm going to get you with a file. Okay, we'll talk about the media. But
Fertilizer?
pardon me?
Fertilizing?
Fertilizing. Thank you. Paphiopedilums are probably the lightest feeders of any orchid. The media tends to. I don't use any slow release fertilizers on Paphiopedilums like I do on everything else. My Cattleyas, Dendrobiums, everything else. I use slow release fertilizer, not Paphiopedilums. I use a seaweed solution that they seem to like, but normally my most frequent fertilizer is 13-6-12 Michigan State formula, low nitrogen. So you don't have to necessarily remember that. Just remember that you don't want a high first number. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. That high number nitrogen is not good for any orchids, especially Paphiopedilums, because they will go into, I don't want to flower because you've over-fertilized me and I'm just going to grow. And we're not growing them for the leaves. So the old adage of starve your plant for more blooms kind of works. Just don't go over. Okay, especially on nitrogen. Okay? Did that answer your question? Good.
Like compost, do you recommend them?
Yes. Yes. I think any organic fertilizers work well on Paphiopedilums, diluted, half strength. The only thing you got to remember about using organic, quote, organic fertilizers that are not water-soluble salt that dissolve is that it's going to affect your media. It's going to make it break down faster. So that's okay, which kind of brings up to a good point. When do I repot and how do I do it? Well, unlike Dendrobiums, Cattleyas, because these are sympodial growth. They have a rhizome. They're not monopodial like Phalaenopsis that grow straight up. They're going to walk, but they walk very slowly, and the space between each fan is very small. So you can have a plant, a Cattleya, that wouldn't last 2 years in a pot like this, this plant would grow in it for 3 or 4 years. So you got to be careful that you don't let your media sour. And when I say by sour, it means the pH is going to change. And the pH changing is the kiss of death for most orchids, especially Paphiopedilums. Remember, we said they will not tolerate root loss. So you have to be extremely careful. Back before we had Orchiata bark and we were using Sequoia or other forms of bark from the mainland US, a byproduct of the lumber industry, we didn't get consistently good material. And unless you took your bag of bark and put it in a big 55-gallon tub and let it soak overnight and skimmed the top off, you get media that would sour within a year. And I've lost a lot of plants to Sequoia orchid bark because of that. So the pH changes and the plant does not tolerate it. You're looking at the media, seems fine, doesn't look like mush, but the chemical reaction that's going on inside there, that media is starting to break down. And as soon as it starts to break down, the pH changes. And in a Cattleya or a Dendrobium, usually will repot before that happens, but a Paphiopedilum you won't. So this is the only plant that I marked my potting date on the back of the tag. And if I look at that tag and it's been a couple years since I repotted it, you should repot it. Back in the day, I used to repot my really valuable plants once a year. But with Orchiata, I don't have. But that's a good way for you to remember how long it's been since you repotted it. No, even though it looks good, knock it out of the pot and repot it. This is the only orchid that I've ever grown that responds immediately to repotting. It loves it. The leaves perk up. Everything is happy. So never be scared to repot your petal. Okay. So want to do just potting demonstration unless there's any questions if I forgot something.
That little cup shape on it, it doesn't eat bug, but it looks like.
Okay, good. Okay, we got time for me to explain what the. Okay, all right. I should have said this in the beginning. I kind of lost. Paphiopedilums are the Southeast Asian slipper orchid. We also have a slipper orchid in the North American Appalachian Mountains, and those are called Cypripediums. And the ones that grow in Central and South America are called Phragmipediums. Now they have a similar flower structure. They evolved to do the same thing, but they will not interbreed. They're totally distinct, separate species that will not interbreed. But so what's the whole deal with the pouch? It's Mauka already. Don't worry. We're gonna take a good one. This took 2 months to open it, So, anyways, okay, I gotta put this down. Okay, what the flower wants to do is catch and release. It wants to catch the bug and let him go. And then, so he tries to land on this little shiny staminode right here. And it's slippery. And he falls down into the pouch. All around the outside of the pouch is slippery, except for a little stairway along the back of the pouch that allows him to come out and exit through these 2 little windows right there where the pollen is. Okay, so he goes out the window. He's got pollen on his back. He's stupid. He gets caught again. He goes through the same scenario, and this time he has the pollen on his back, and he's got to rub against the stigmatic surface, which is back behind here, right in this. And he puts the pollen in. And he kind of gets stuck a little bit, so he does perfectly. He jiggles it around inside so it sticks. And then he goes through the window, gets some more pollen on his back, and flies away. So they don't want to kill the insect. They want him to get away and take the pollen with it.
Is it a fly? Fly pollen?
It's a fly's pollen. Now, we have the specific pollinator in Hawaii for a Phragmipedium, Phragmipedium longifolium. And this is a little hoverfly. You've probably seen it. They have a little, they're not very big, they're about this big, and they'll hover. Just doing the hover, okay? That's the specific pollinator for longifolium. So about 10 years ago, I started seeing seedlings coming up on the floor of my greenhouse in the orchid pots, and I looked at them, turns out they were Phragmipedium seedlings. This insect was getting in the longifolium and then getting into another Phragmipedium, except the other Phragmipedium that he went into was from Brazil. So he couldn't get out. So he died in there. That's how I found out what was going on. I found this bug inside the pouch, and I had seed pods on all my Phragmipediums. So now if you visit my nursery, I have Phragmipediums growing on the ground all over the place. So does that answer your question? Okay. Kind of long, but anyways. Okay. My media is 90% medium, 1/2 to 3/4. Power 5 is the Power 5, yeah. 3/8 to 1/2. Yeah, whatever it is. Anyways, it's pretty much the same stuff that I use for my Cattleyas. I used to use a finer orchid bark. And I found that it responds better. The air holes that are created by the coarser bark, the plant seems to do better. Although I will incorporate some of the smaller in as I pot. But as a basic main ingredient, I use the Power 5 3/8. I use 6 parts bark. And when I say part, anything is a part. So 6 of these to 1 of these, number 3 perlite. Okay? You can get away with that. But over the years, I wanted to. So I also take, this is the leftovers what you get from a bale of New Zealand sphagnum moss at the bottom of the bale. And it has, you can come in and put your fingers in it. It's real fine. It has little chunks, little buds of sphagnum in it still. So I will put a couple handfuls of that and mix it in, just to give it something organic. And then my own special tweak is monkey pod leaves. Okay, monkey pod leaves are gold. Monkey pod is a legume. It's a bean. It's in the bean family. And it fixes nitrogen in its leaves and in its seed pods. And the reason it fixes nitrogen is because the tree fertilizes itself. You ever see when the monkey pod drops all its leaves? Okay, it's feeding itself. All those leaves go down and decompose, and they have fixed nitrogen, which they will release as they break down. So I have a monkey pod that is adjacent to my property. I get plenty that blow into my greenhouse and blow up against the side and dry out. And I take a couple handfuls of that and I break it up and mix it in with my meat. And you guys are welcome to come up and look at this. It's not patented. So you guys are welcome to. But monkey pods leaves are great, and not just for orchids, for all kinds of stuff. Put it in any of your potting media and stuff. It's just like it's gold. Okay. All right.
Is it sold in a store?
No. Monkey pod leaves? No. But you can go to any park.
I think we go on Mariko Hana.
Yeah.
The alley.
Yeah.
They love it. It's sitting better, and you can get
as much as you want. Or you can go to Manoa District Park where there is choke there too. Any big park, where there's monkey pods.
So it's good for any orchid, not just paths.
It's good for other things.
I don't put it in anything but paths.
Oh.
No.
So what does it do? It neutralizes the pH?
No.
Oh.
Binds nitrogen. It fixes nitrogen and releases nitrogen slowly to the plant.
So it's like you putting leaf mold in it because it gets burnt.
Yes.
It would have really.
Exactly. So I'm not trying to grow it in straight leaf mulch because that's overwhelming, but I will incorporate it into my media. Now you don't have to do this. You can just get away with the first thing I told you, bark and perlite. And even the perlite, now that if you use Orchiata bark, the perlite is basically in there so that you have something that never decomposes and breaks down. So if you don't want to put it in there, you don't have to put it in there. I like the way it looks. And I kind of judge my media. I look at my media, see if it's attractive. I call it in how it feels, how it smells. Kind of weird, huh?
And Orchiata is expensive.
Orchiata is expensive. But the thing with Orchiata is that it has many stages of use. I take my Paphiopedilums or any of my orchids, when I repot, it goes into a bin and I save it because use Orchiata bark is the best anthurium mix. You can't buy a better anthurium mix. After it is, because Orchiata initially is very dry. It's kiln dry in New Zealand. I think that's why it lasts so long. So initially, when you use it in orchids, you have to be careful that you don't let your orchids dry out too much because you have to wet Orchiata a lot more than some of the other barks. So, but once it has been in the pot for a couple of years, it takes on a different mind of its own, or a different texture. And for anthuriums, it is perfect. I also incorporate it in my soil mixes for other things, my trees and other. Use it instead of cinders because it's giving you a coarseness, right, in your peat mixes. So to your question, it is expensive, but I think you get way more bang for your buck. And you're recycling it, right? You're recycling.
What sells Orchiata now?
Huh?
What sells Orchiata?
Nutrient Ag and Cunia. Nutrient Ag and Cunia. You got to get it when it's there because initially it goes to the Big Island because that's where it goes into the black hole Big Island. But some of it does. I've convinced Gabe at Nutrient Ag that there are people here that want it. So there is some available on every shipment, but it's not as much as goes to the Big Island. So you got to get on it. Okay. All right. So I brought this just because this is a big plant, and your first thought would be, wow, I could make like 5 plants out of that, right? This particular plant, if you cut this up into pieces, every one of them will die because it does not want to be divided. And everybody makes this mistake in Paphiopedilums, with Paphiopedilum. You have to... Now, when you got a Paphiopedilum that's really stuck in the pot, you got to wet it very thoroughly, and you're going to have to squeeze this pot. Sometimes, and this is a trick I learned from my wife, who is an excellent cattleya repotter, and she's about this tall. She'll put it on the ground and use her knee and kneel on it and rotate it and kneel on it, and that will pull the roots away from the side of the pot. Or I try to do it like this, but actually the kneeling thing works really good. So then we got to get this out. It's out. Okay, I'm going to leave this here. I'm not going to break it apart because what I want you to see here is live root tips growing. They're going to be little white tips. Little white tips right in here. That means your plant is a happy camper. If you have growing root tips in a Paphiopedilum, life is good. Now, I'm not going to break this up. I'm going to leave it like this, but this does need to be kind of divided. And when I say kind of divided, it means that the plant will divide itself. So if I break that up and I'm kind of getting all the media out, I take it to the hose, I spray it really good, Now, anything that kind of falls apart, that's a division. But never take your cutting and cut into the rhizome. Never cut it. Because that what you cut off is not going to work for beans. But if it falls off naturally, then it's okay. Go figure. And this isn't true for all Paphiopedilums, but you never know which one. Like, for example, this is Madia. This is a green. This is probably the most cultivated Paphiopedilum in the world because it used to be cultivated for cut flowers because it lasts for a long time. You can cut Madia up into single fans and it'll grow. But this one, if you even think about doing that, forget it. Okay. Now, let's get... Okay, I already took this out. This was growing in this pot. It has kind of roots of so-so. These, pressure on the root is the best way to tell you got a good Paphiopedilum root, more so than other orchids. And they will feel mushy a lot easier than some other orchids. So light pressure, if it feels squishy, just kind of wiggle it out. Now, Paphiopedilums are not susceptible to any orchid viruses. There's been no recorded instance of virus in a Paphiopedilum. That we still want to have good sanitation. We want to keep our same sanitation as we do for other orchids. So that means we're going to flame the tool in between every plant. Don't melt off the plastic on the handle. This enough to. So take that and. Okay, you still got pretty good roots. Now, he was in this pot already, but the last thing you want to do is to put a Paphiopedilum in a pot where it becomes an island with media all around it. It wants to have contact with the side of the pot, the roots. In fact, if you have a plant with very few roots, you put it all the way up against the edge of the pot, all the roots, and fill your media in there. But this is only Paphiopedilums, not other orchids, just Paphiopedilums. But this one has enough roots that I can spread it out and it will touch. Touch the side. Now it's the easiest orchid to pot because it's pretty much just like any other plant. You know, you're not really having to force it around around the roots because it's not an epiphyte. It doesn't have to feel like it's really secure in the pot for it to establish. But you're still going to use the same kind of method as when you do other plants. Your force is towards the middle with fingers. You can also use a chopstick to kind of wiggle them in. And just pressure like this. And then I'll take a little bit of this finer stuff and kind of just do a little top pressing. Just so that it kind of fills in and makes a that's all there is. And it should. Now if it falls out, do it again and use a little more pressure. You don't have to hold it up that high, that's good. But you know, just down, okay? Okay, there's that. Now, I think we got one other one here. Oh, should talk about pots while we're right on this. Okay, take a look at the kind of pots that I use. You'll notice that none of these have a lip. It's straight. The ones where like a normal, that kind of pot has a lip. I don't like the lips. I don't like the way the roots, sometimes when the roots come out, they get all weird. So everything I have here is straight sides. Some of them got the hole poked in, some don't. But this is a size pot you will probably buy your first Paphiopedilum. I mean, even this plant right here was just transplanted not too long ago, and it was in a pot like this. Hilo Orchid Farm will sell flowering multifloral plants in this size pot. Okay. Now, if this thing gets packed with roots, then you can move it up into the next one. But you can see you're not doing a big jump. So do not overpot. Put it in the smallest pot you can cram the roots in, because you're not worried so much about it growing out of the pot in a year. So you can get away with putting it back into a smaller pot. So this guy, okay, this is a lab tool, lab spatula. Every orchid person should have one. They're perfect to get the roots off the side of your pot, and then they're also really good when it's stuck to the side. You can slim it down here without damaging the roots. Okay, we got him out. Now he's got a pretty good root mass. We've got a new root coming right here where you can see the white, which is good. Okay, when you have old dead leaves on the side, tendency is to try to pull them off. Do not. You can rip the rhizome, better to cut them off. It's better to kind of leave, if you can see this little old dead leaves there, okay, that's protecting your rhizome. You don't want to get too anal and want to clean all that off and make it too perfect, because in nature, that's protecting the rhizome, because those leaves stay on there until they rot. So you don't got to worry that you're leaving a rotted leaf on there. It's going to somehow affect your plant. It won't, but cut it off. Do not rip it off. Now, this guy, I don't know. We could chance him. Okay, normally if I was at home, I would take this, and I'm gonna probably have to do this when I go home. Take it to the hose, and with a spray nozzle on there, blast it right into the center there. Get all, because this is where you're going to get a lot of decomposing. I mean, this is actually, you should pass this around. You can kind of see a nice live root. Okay, we can, okay, here's another example of pot size. This is a multifloral, or a sequential flowering species. It's already flowered once, and this is the second growth. I kind of made the mistake of moving these up from this size to this size after the first flowering, and they didn't like it. I grew these from flasks, so I never experienced them. So now I'm leaving them in this size pot for a couple of flowered growths. Okay, I mean, it looks like when you take this out, it looks like it would fit in this pot fine, but you know, we tried it and it didn't work, so we're not gonna. So don't be scared to leave it in a small pot. Just remember, you got to water it. Okay.
Same thing.
As far as what?
Who you need a small pot? Like this.
You're the hono expert. I cannot grow hono. I'm embarrassed that I cannot grow honos for bees. And huh? Well, I'm doing okay on these, but my hono's shabby. So all you guys that grow the 20-foot long honos, you got it. I don't know why, and I tried. I really have. But I guess it's just I got too much other stuff I got to worry about. So, but that allows me to enjoy yours, which is fun. I can come and see yours and enjoy.
I have a question.
Sure.
Do they like to be root bound, would you say then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
so
I would say they.
let the leaves tell you what's going on as far as when to repot, not necessarily what's going on.
I would say what's really going to tell you when to repot is if it's been 3 or 4 years, or if you pull it out of the pot and the roots are so root bound that it's time to repot.
Well, yeah.
Well, yeah, we don't want to talk about mushy and dying, right? Because, like I said, if you got to path it to the point where it's mushy roots and dying, you're in for a long haul. You're in for a long haul before it comes back. Because, okay, I got this plant in a flask in 1993. 1993. So it was in like this, right? So it's taken that long, over 25 years, to get to that point. So they're long. They're a long time. So if you're going to buy a Paphiopedilum and you have never grown Paphiopedilums, buy one in flower. Buy one in flower. Do not look at it and say, oh, the seedling's so cheap. Yeah, well, there's a reason why the seedling's so cheap, because it's going to be a few years before you see a flower. Even though they try to sell you it as flowering size, there's no way they can tell when that's going to flower. All right, it is kind of flowering size, but you can still grow it for a couple more years and it won't flower. One other thing, quick thing. Once you do get your plant to come up and make a spike, and you're going to pick it up and you're going to look at it and you're going to go, wow, this is so cool, blah, blah, blah. And it was growing on the bench like this. And you put it down like this, or like this, or maybe even like this. Okay, this flower spike is photosensitive. It's going to come up in the morning and it's going to start looking for the strongest source of light. And if you move it even a little bit from where it started to initiate this flower spike, it's going to get quickened. Now this guy came up, he initiated the flower bud before Christmas. This is the slowest Paphiopedilum on record from initiation to flowering. But because it went from December now to April, the sun has moved over. So where it's been looking. It's been looking. And this is what happens. So and it doesn't matter if it's a multiflora or a single flora or whatever. Once it initiates the flower, what I try to do is when I see the buds start to come up down deep inside, if maybe it's been growing like this, but I'll orientate it towards the sunset. The last sunlight it's going to see is where I want it to orientate, and that's where I keep it. So always keep your buds facing west. That makes sense. Okay, any questions? Okay, Bernard got this back to me. So we're going to put this guy back because I'm going to wash it off when I get home. But I'm going to stick it back in the same pot, and it's really, really jammed up. So I'm going to take a breach of faith, and we're going to move it up. Now, We don't want to jam it all the way down in there because we want it to be, we don't want it too far down. So we'll put a little in the bottom. Now, orientate it so that the edge of the rhizome where the emerging plant, new growth is coming up is going to be grade. It's going to be just a little below the lip of the pot.
So will that one walk across the pot?
Yes, it will. Yes, it will. But I'm not going to do what I would do with a cattleya and jam the last growth up against the back, because this one I'm going to use the roots, because I want the roots to be up against the side of the pot. So he's going to be back, kind of back, but not like I would do for a cattleya or a dendrobium. Again, I'm using my fingers here, but actually potting stick kind of works better to tease the, because you're going to just trying to tease it in.
Does it have a particular time of year that's the pot?
No. I said, remember I said, any Paphiopedilums do not care. They would want you to repot them every 2 weeks if it would. No, this is, I never think about, well, for those of you who were at my Cunia talk the other night, we were talking about dormancy and only repot when the plant is in active growth. Paphiopedilums really don't have a dormancy. They're pretty much always in active growth. So we don't have to worry about that, taking a plant and throwing it into a new media and disrupting it when it's dormant and not taking up any water or any nutrients. Excuse me. Looks like a new plant, huh? I don't know if he's going to do this though. All right. Okay, here's your tag. Write the potting date on the back, and you're good for a couple of years. Okay, any questions?
The flower spikes, do you cut them off when the flowers are done, or is it like a phalaenopsis where you leave it and they can re-spike?
They're not going to respike. I kind of treat all my flowering plants, I don't cut the flower spike off until it's brown and dead, because I don't want to have to keep re-sanitizing. Right? So I usually wait until it's totally dead, and then I go in and put them off. But they, to your question, they will not regenerate. They will not regenerate, except this guy.
The sequential.
The sequential. Right? Now, the parent, no, not necessarily the parent on this, but there's a plant, a sequential jungle collected plant. It's called Chamberlainianum. It's used a lot in hybridizing, and it makes a sequential flowering spike. So they've collected specimens in Sumatra where the flower spike was 6 feet long.
Wow.
And I used to, when I do the New York show, I would stay with my friend in Pennsylvania. And I went to the show in whatever it was, 92, 93, and he had that plant in his living room. And I came back a year later, it was still in the living room. It was still in flower.
Wow.
That was indoors.
Wow.
So these actually, for the sequential flowering ones, probably give you the most bang for your buck, because they'll stay in flower for a long time, a lot longer. You're not going to get the bang, but you're going to get, once they get, and this is still young. When this gets a little bigger, it's going to make a lot bigger flower spike. And I think it will have more flowers open at the same time, because I've seen some awarded ones of this. So this is Sanderianum, which has the really long petals, and Primulinum, which is a small little green and white flower. So this is a primary hybrid.
Is it easy to identify just by looking up online the name of the plant if it's going to be multifloral or
Yes.
sequential? Okay.
Yes, 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 yes. Anything else? Nope. Nope. Okay, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Both DeMoss. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll call you back again.